What's up, YouTube fans? What I wanted to talk about in this video, right, is how oftentimes when someone tries to address, statistical improbabilities regarding the origin of life, with multiverse concepts and or just an infinite universe, that even just this one universe could be infinite, if there is a edge to it that is like the furthest point of it with nothing beyond it. We have not found that point. We don't know where it stops, if it even does stop, right? But so when someone points out these possibilities, a criticism that people will oftentimes make is like, well, that's untestable and therefore unscientific. Well, okay, so a few things. I don't generally present it as scientific. Arguably, it's mostly untestable, so arguably it maybe isn't scientific, but I do not generally present it as scientific. I simply present it as a possibility that cannot reasonably be ruled out, right? And I do think that for for it to be untestable, right, means that either way it's untestable, right? So to be real, it's untestable. To also, it's also just as much as untestable to say that it's finite, right? That the observable region of the cosmos is the limit, and that there's no nothing beyond the observable extent of it. That would also be untestable, and so by the same token unscientific, right? And I do think that so long as something isn't illogical or improbable, just saying that something is untestable, that does make it unscientific, right? But I do think that that does not in of itself rule an idea out as a possibility, right? Because us humans are nowhere near at the point of like being able to test all that does exist within the entirety of reality. So us being unable to test something does not rule it out as a possibility. And when I say that, what some people are going to say is like, oh, well then, doesn't that also apply then towards God and afterlife and things like that? And with that, you would somewhat have a point, although I would argue that ideas like that do actually make some testable predictions, which have been falsified, right? And some of those ideas are implausible from like a probability standpoint, I would argue, and also not well defined. But that's a separate topic for another time, so we'll put that aside for this video. But going back to with the multiverse or infinite universe, right? To the extent that it's untestable and therefore arguably unscientific, likewise, to say that the universe is finite, to say that the observable region of the cosmos is all that there is of the cosmos, that is just as much also unscientific, untestable, right? And so therefore, statistical arguments regarding origin of life to begin with, one could argue are untestable and unscientific, right? Because to make the argument that, the origination of life is too statistically improbable to happen somewhere within the entire volume of the cosmos as a whole, right? That is relying on untestable unscientific assumptions, right, that, the observable region of the cosmos is all there is, or that there's some limit, right, which is a completely untestable, unscientific assumption, right, which very well could be false, right? And then if you want to say like, well, uh, we're not arguing that it's too statistically improbable to happen somewhere within the entire volume of the cosmos as a whole, because obviously there's no way of testing if that's true or not. It very well may not be too statistically improbable to happen anywhere within the entire volume of the cosmos as a whole, because we have no idea how large the cosmos is. But, what if you say like, oh, well, our argument is that it's too statistically improbable to happen in the same spot that us observers find ourselves. Well, okay, so that would actually be a testable claim, which actually, in that case, you've already been shown to be wrong. There's actually a lot of evidence that you are wrong, right? Because it's already been demonstrated experimentally that it's through our sensory organs that us humans observe the world around us, right? And through which we have accumulated all of our scientific data that we have accumulated, right? And we also have a good understanding of the evolutionary steps leading up to those sensory organs, right? And that it required the origination of life to have those evolutionary steps. And we know of nothing else that would lead to sensory organs existing anywhere where there isn't life, right? So to say that observers like that it's like statistically improbable that us observers would find ourselves in the same spot as it happened, that actually is testable, right? And the evidence is against you on that, right? We have strong evidence that observers could only find themselves somewhere where it happened, right? Whereas to say that it's too statistically improbable to happen anywhere within the entire volume of the cosmos, that relies on untestable assumptions that, the farthest we can see into the cosmos is all there is. And so, it just, stops and, nothing more beyond that, which is just as much an untestable assumption as saying that it's infinite or, vastly larger than the extent that we can see, right? And so, ultimately, aside from like saying that it's too statistically improbable to happen at the same spot that us observers find ourselves, which is testable, and we have a lot of evidence against. Otherwise, statistical arguments regarding the origin of life are just going to be a matter of like, oh, is it too statistically improbable to happen anywhere within the entire volume of the cosmos, right? So it ultimately then comes down to what's your model of how large the cosmos as a whole is, which currently is untestable. We have no idea whatsoever, right? And so, how large is it? It could potentially be infinite. Even if not infinite, it could be way larger than the observable region. The observable region could be a very tiny little portion of the entire volume of it. What is the entire volume of it? That's completely untestable, completely beyond human knowledge currently, right? And so we don't actually have strong evidence either way as to is the origination of life too statistically improbable to happen anywhere within the entire volume of the cosmos. It, I guess, could be, but it very well could not be. The fact that life does exist will be evidence that it probably is not, right? Otherwise, life would not exist, right? And there's no evidence that it is, right, at all whatsoever, right? All right, that's all for now. See you guys.